The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with over 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 146 of the Squawk Ident Podcast, recorded on the 7th of July, 2024, from the mobile Aviator Sound Studios from high atop the second floor of the Courtyard Williams Center in Tucson, Arizona. It's hot! It's hot! It's a dry heat. On today's flight, we discuss flight benefits, the downward trend in hiring practices, jet lag, and we will also take a look at the history and development of the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. So stick with us as we discuss all this and more on this, the 146th episode of the Squawk Ident Podcast. Before we start the show off today, I would like to thank all of you that took the time to write in with kind words, feedback, and encouragement after the last episode. It truly does mean a lot to me. Like this message from Brooke. She wrote, "Good evening. My name is Brooke, and I've been an avid listener for about a year now. I've loved every single show and want to thank you for everything that you do. I'm currently a young aviator teaching others at a school down here in Dallas. Your recent episode, Flight 145, really spoke to me. Growing up, I had divorced parents, and getting into this career had been a fear of mine. I can't thank you enough for speaking on this topic and the stereotype associated with it. You brought light to the end of the tunnel, and I'm sorry you're going through this. It truly sounds like you have grown and become a better person from all of this. Take some time for yourself and take care of yourself. For us as listeners, I promise I'll take in every moment of general aviation flying. Thank you for everything, Brooke." Well, Brooke, thank you so much for writing in, and good luck with your aviation journey. Diego also wrote in with, "First, sorry to hear about your divorce. I recently went through one last year. I remember feeling like a zombie, but please know you will get through it. Time is your friend, and you will come out the other side. Feel free to reach out. I live and fly out of San Diego." Well, thank you, Diego. Again, receiving all these words of encouragement and the feedback has been absolutely amazing. And yes, it does help me and the Squawk Ident crew very much to get all this feedback. We also received some feedback from Paul, who wrote, "Hi, Tony and the Squawk Ident crew. Wanted to recommend to you a very good YouTube channel called Stig Aviation. Look at episode number 24. He talks about the 321neo fire at the ground power area. It starts at about the 8-minute and 50-second mark. The channel is great if you are into heavy metal maintenance, that is. By the way, your show is awesome. Keep it up, Paul." Well, thank you, Paul, for that recommendation. It was great to receive all this feedback, and I personally can't thank all of you enough for taking the time out of your busy schedule to write in. Now let's get ready to depart on today's flight, because it's a great day to fly. Well, joining me today is an exceptional aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He's a professional CFI, and MEI flight instructor, a former Embraer 145 airline pilot, King Air instructor, Dassault Falcon 900 EZ 2000, and G650 commander. He currently operates a Gulfstream 650 for a Fortune 500 corporation in the USA. He joins us fresh off his international recurrent training and joining us from somewhere in San Diego, California. Please help me in welcoming to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Tony. It's been a while, and I realized I think it's been a little longer than I realized. Well, first of all, I couldn't remember where to find the mute button here on our Zoom meeting, and then also, my intro kind of changed a little bit because of my new position, which I've been doing for a quarter now. So
yeah,
it's apparently it's been a while.
Well, it's been a minute, and we talked a little bit about this on the last show. It's the shows have not been as frequent as they used to be. I think at the height when we were starting out together on this adventure, we were, I think, producing
You were
about
crazy.
2 or 3 a month. I think one month I did 4 in a month, like one
Yeah,
every
you were
week.
trying to do one a week there for a little while.
Yeah. Now, if this was a, short format show, then I had somebody that was producing and editing and doing all that stuff for me. Yeah, I could see myself, knocking out 4 or 5 shows in a day and then editing them and posting them like every week. But man, I don't know how some of these podcasts do it every week. They must have a lot of free time.
Yeah, that's true. And it sounds like you touched on your last show about the personal things that have been going on, and having gone through that myself a while ago. Also, I'm well aware that it takes a lot out of you, both time
Yeah.
and mentally. So,
Yeah.
but glad to be back for this episode for sure.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome back. Yeah, I mean, I think Diego in his feedback summed it up really nicely. It's like being a zombie. You got all this stress in your life, and you're trying to, recuperate on your sleep, and you're trying to do things that keep you calm and remind you that life is good and work is good, and thank God you're healthy and able to fly airplanes for a living, and you have friends and family, and I have friends like you that are checking up on me and helping me out. And I think, and it's funny because we talk about this on our cockpit therapy sessions. This is what I call flying the line now, cockpit therapy. Been doing it for 20 years, and I've heard a thing or two, and I've been up there and told my story enough times to where I don't need to tell it anymore. The stress is, like, I feel like I've gotten over the hump here, and I think what really stands out are when you have friends that matter and count. And in this industry, it's funny because how many memes have you seen that says, "I don't have any friends. I'm a pilot. I'm constantly gone. I'm not around for the barbecues on the weekend and the hollandaise. What is that? Is that a sauce? I mean, that's the life of a pilot, and depending on whether you're doing corporate or airline or cargo, it really doesn't matter. You're constantly schedule wise on the go, and it's hard to keep up interpersonal relationships with friends and family. And there's holidays you may not be there. So when you have a friend that drops everything and says, "Oh, I know what you're going through. I'm going to come up and stay with you for 4 or 5 days and help you paint the house," it really matters. It makes a huge difference, and is probably one of the most I don't know, just heartfelt things I can say. And this is what Roger did. He called me up in the process of this almost I don't know, been almost a year now, I guess, 8 months, 9 months.
6 months, because that was right around December, I think.
Was it? Yeah,
around Christmas.
around Christmas. Yeah, it was November. Yeah, and Roger's like, "All right, I know what you're going through. What do you need? I'm gonna come up and help you. You're painting, okay?" And I'm sitting there, going, straight line, Roger, straight line. Giving him a hard time. But man, it's these actions and friends like you that have really made the world of difference in my life. So I just want to say thank you to you, sir.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
And you will come through it on the other side and be a better and stronger person for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of coming to an end, but there's still, like we were talking about in the pre-show, a lot of changes are coming. So yeah, forgive me, folks, for not producing a podcast every single week. But eventually, the podcast frequency, I think, will start to pick up, but not quite yet. Still, many things going on. Selling properties and moving, possibly, and having to buy somewhere else, and maybe even changing base. Maybe change of scenery. I don't know. So a lot is on the line here. A lot of decisions to be made. So thank you for bearing with us during this time, and thank you for all the support. That's huge, absolutely huge. Well, Roger, we talked about what we've been up to earlier, and you were telling me you're doing trips to China from the West Coast. This is pretty exciting. You just got back from a trip. What can you tell me about this? What's going on? What's involved?
Well, so I now I fly for a Fortune 500 company that does have a global footprint, and so much more of the flying that I'm doing now is of the international variety. Um, we go east, we go west. We don't so it's mostly all northern hemisphere. We don't really go to the southern hemisphere really at all, but both Europe and Asia are common destinations. My first couple months were all Europe, and I kind of made fun of you in some of the in the pre-show because it is I did back-to-back Europe trips. You fly out there, come back, and then turn right back around, and a few days later, head right back out there. And then a couple weeks ago was an Asia trip. Um, I went to China, and which you could not do a podcast from. The internet regulations out there make it extremely it's very different with the amount of things that are shut down and censored over there.
So, like, if you were like you're in China and you're at the hotel, right? And
Yep.
they have Wi-Fi connection, right?
There's a Wi-Fi connection.
So you get on the Wi-Fi and you go to Google. Is there Google? There's no Google.
Nope. Google is censored. Yahoo is censored. So you cannot access any of those things in China. There's kind of a whole list of them. And even though we had a Wi-Fi connection, I mean, it was so, and this, I'm not sure where it was from. It was just so slow. You couldn't really access much of anything either. But so there was 3 days, 3 days or so there where I was kind of, you almost, it's almost embarrassing to say, but you almost feel like you're cut off from the world now because we've changed so much in the 20 years and how always having, the internet and the quote unquote world at your fingertips on your phone all the time. And then all of a sudden now when it's like, what do you mean I can't check my Gmail or my Yahoo or my whatever? You don't even have email because those things are,
Yeah.
you can't access them. And so it's kind of an odd feeling. But yeah, and then, next week it's off to Korea and then another China trip at the end of the month. So it's kind of just, it's a mixed bag of all kinds of stuff.
Now, when you're going to go off to Korea, is it Seoul?
We are going to Seoul.
Yeah. And how long are you going to have there? Is it going to be a long time?
No, no, we don't really have a long time much of anywhere. We're going out and we're basically there for 24 hours and turning around and coming back because most, everything that we're doing now is of the business nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so, obviously high level meetings, to fly that kind of distance for that amount of time.
Yeah.
Meetings are over. We turn around and we fly them back home.
Okay.
For the rest of the corporate responsibilities that they have.
Yeah. So
Which
the
is
days
why in
of
the end, we operate these aircraft is so that they have the opportunity to be able to do this kind of stuff because that's the nature of business at the Fortune 500, Fortune 100 level is that these face-to-face meetings are that important to be able to throw hundreds of thousands of dollars on a 24-hour trip.
I gotcha. So the days of getting the rental car and putzing around beach communities for 4 or 5 days while you're waiting for your client to come back, those
no
are
more
over.
Vacation time. It's you show up, have 24 hours to kind of acclimate, and all right, let's go start doing some sightseeing. Those days are no more. I didn't on that trip. That was a pretty brutal trip because we had several destinations, except then you're flying during the day over there. Except we've flown a red eye flight over there,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're flying in the day, which is on the backside of the clock, back in your home time zone in the U.S. And you do that for a couple days, and then you depart at night, and so you're flying all night, overnight again, and you're pretty messed up.
Yeah.
Pretty backwards. But
Yeah. Well, we were talking about
make it back home.
We're talking about circadian rhythms, and I was explaining to Roger earlier how my trip to Italy went. We'll talk about that here in a minute in the show. But circadian rhythms, jet lag, fatigue, all these things that a lot of the flying folk, the passengers, they think that aren't you used to it? You're a pilot, aren't you used to it? Yes and no, but when it comes to that extreme, and you're crossing what they call theaters, right? And the FAR 117, there's a home base time, and then there's theaters, and like you leave one theater to another theater, and that turns into a whole other chart that you have to consult in terms of rest regulations. Now, when you're Part 91, there is no 117 rest requirements. So, yeah, you guys have to really be careful that you are fit for duty, basically, well rested. And it's hard when your internal clock is constantly being rewound and fast forwarded, and the jet lag is very real. And sometimes it's kind of like knowing what you're like when you've had one too many to drink. You have to recognize what's going on and be cognizant of the fact that, yeah, you need to stop, you need to take a break, go drink some water, get some rest, let time be your ally. But sometimes as a pilot, when you're dealing with fatigue and rest, those symptoms might be very, very subtle. And if you're not very careful and cognizant about it, you could find yourself in a whole world of hurt where you're flying an airplane across an ocean and you're doing touch and goes with your head because you're falling asleep behind the wheel. And people think, well, aren't pilots sleeping all the time when they're up there? No, they're not supposed to. Because if something goes wrong or something pops up, I mean, you have to deal with it on a relatively quick fashion. And if you don't even notice it because you're asleep and you look over and your co-pilot's asleep too, and you're like, what the? Not a good day. So
I think that is one of the prime indicators or symptoms, if you will, of the lack of sleep and fatigue is just your reaction time to things. It's like you could have some loud gong or ding 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 or whatever the case may be, but your reaction time to react to whatever it is going to be much slower. And that's just the reality of fatigue. There's nothing that you can really do about it. Everybody, whether it's the airlines with 121 regulations, 117 regulations, I mean, there are regulations that are meant to mitigate it. We have our own mitigation. We always fly with, so we get best on the way out there. But still, yeah, there you got two people staying awake over a rather vast body of water at night. And,
yeah, not much to
fortunately,
look out.
nothing really happens over the water.
Knock on wood.
It's amazing how large Oakland's oceanic airspace is.
Right.
And so you don't have any frequency changes. You don't have anything for hours upon hours on hours on end.
Now, do you guys have
And then you're in
CPDLC
Japan.
in there?
What's that?
Or do you have CPDLC in your flight deck?
Oh, yeah. Oh, whoa. What are we, in the dark ages? Flying in 1970s design airplane like the Airbus.
Nice. Thank you. No, we have CPDLC. The Neos all have CPDLC. But I can remember, not too long ago when I was flying over to Hawaii over the Pacific Oceanic, and we'd have to contact San Francisco radio. San Francisco radio, this is Legacy Flight so-and-so on whatever, 5547 with a cell call check and a position report. And you had to talk,
even with the Falcon 2000, it was the same thing. It was HF only. And then Europe was a little bit worse because you actually had an air traffic control center change between Gander and then Shanwick. And so there's at 30 West.
Nice.
Contact Iceland radio or Shanwick radio, or wherever you're going on, this primary, this secondary, and then you got to do the whole thing all over again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, CPDLC and ADSB has really made things so much easier. No more position reporting.
Yeah.
So
what is
cell call check?
What is CPDLC for those listeners out there? It's Controller Pilot Data Link Communications. It's a system used by air traffic controllers and pilots to exchange digital messages. So on our FMGC or Flight Management Guidance Control Panel or computer, there'll be like a text message, and you'll get a little ding ding in the airplane, and you go, oh, I got a message. It's from ATC. And they'll tell you everything from for traffic, climb, maintain, flight level 410, whatever. And then you go, okay, roger that. And you push a button, and then as soon as you level off, the airplane, at the new altitude, the airplane knows that you've leveled off. So it generates an automated text message going, okay, reporting level at flight level 410. And then you just hit send. And then now air traffic control knows, because you're not under radar contact. There are no radar facilities out over the ocean. So they really, in the past, they didn't know where you were. You had to report, and you had a 3-minute gap. So when you're reporting your position report, you say, okay, we were over this waypoint at this time. We're anticipating or estimating reporting over the next waypoint at this time, and then the next waypoint after that is this, and fine. And you give them all this stuff, your altitude and how much, usually how much fuel you have, all that stuff. So you do this, and then you better cross that next waypoint at the time you reported. If you're going to be off by more than 3 minutes, they consider that a gross navigational error. Ours is 3. You have 2? So
yeah, it was 2.
For 2 for you? Yeah, for us it's 3. So you had to be within 3 minutes. So if you sped up, which you're not supposed to speed up without first communicating, but let's say the winds were different than reported, and now you're going to be there 4 minutes past the time you estimated. Well, you better call them back and say, okay, new estimate is this, and you give the winds, and you tell them, these are the winds, and they can adjust. Now with CPDLC, it's all automated. You just push a button, and so really, if you're doing a transoceanic flight, once you get over waters and you're on with, say, Oakland Center or San Francisco radios, you're communicating with, then really you're not talking to anyone for the duration of the flight until you get back into radar contact or control airspace. So it's quite an adventure. It's something great to learn when you're doing international flying. The first couple times can be intimidating, but it's nice when you can just text.
It's so much easier now. I mean, you brought up the non-radar. It's not radar, but I mean, for all intents and purposes now, in a lot of places like the North Atlantic, it might as well be now because of the ADSC.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
exactly.
it's not radar because there's no radar facilities, but it's all satellite based now. And every 8 seconds, they know where you are because of ADS.
Yeah.
Which means that they know where you are if you start to go the wrong way, like you've got your flight plan, which is a big thing. You brought up the GNE, the gross navigational errors. They know, and they can actually tell you before you get there because they know every 8 seconds. And even the Pacific now is going to that. It's not mandated in the Pacific like it is in the North Atlantic, but they got a saying, better. I don't remember what it's something. You get better services, the better, the more technology you have, and so it's so much easier, so much nicer, and
yeah,
there's a lot to go into it, which is why I just had another 8-hour recurrent for international procedures. But
yeah, and how often are you doing your recurrent?
Becoming much simpler.
Yeah, how often are you redoing your recurrent? Is that once a year?
No, ours is every 2. I mean, Part 91, we actually don't have a regulation for it, but we do it every 2 years.
Every 2 years, your
Most
current
places
operator.
every 2 years.
Yeah. Now you also had to do one more thing, and you can't just go, "Hey, I'm a pilot and I'm going to fly to China." You just can't do that. You have to get a visa, a crew visa in your case. Now, walk us through that. Is that like a phone call, or what do you have to do to get this crew visa? And how do you find out if you even need a visa to go to this country like that you're going to go to?
Anyone to go to China, there's a few countries that require visas, and doing visas is one of those things that's kind of you got to do a little bit of research on it. Some places, Turkey is an example, you require Turkey to go to visa, except you can get that visa probably within 60 seconds because it's all online. You go and you just apply, and then within 60 seconds, they'll usually have it approved. Other places, China being on the other end of the spectrum, because it requires a trip basically to the embassy. I just sent it through a service provider. I had to send in my primary passport. They ran it down to the Chinese embassy, I guess, and I got basically an entire passbook page sized visa with barcode and all kinds of stuff on it. So that took a few days to get back. But yeah, everyone needs a visa in order to get into China. Mine, and because it's for crew purposes, I have a crew visa, but and it dictates the amount of time that I'm allowed to stay. I don't even know what it is. I think it's 10 days. I think it's 10-day visa. And it's stay for 5 years, I think is what it is.
Yeah, and it depends on the country. The different time frames. But if you want to learn more about like if you're going somewhere, and even if you're going, sometimes you're going on a cruise to Asia, and the cruise line will walk you through the process and how to fill out the different types of visas. But travel.state.gov is a U.S. State Department website, and over there you can find a portal about visas and which countries require them, how to obtain them. I believe the crew visas is at C1 visa. Sound about right?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. So according to the State Department website, if you're traveling to the United States to join a vessel that you're going to work on, and then you're going to go outside of the country, you need to apply for different visas, and they range from 10 days, 29 days, and it has age requirements and how to obtain them. Sometimes you hear it says you have to have an interview. You have to go to the embassy and do an interview, but with crew members, I don't think it's that
depending on what kind of visa and how long you want to be somewhere, that could require an in-person interview.
Right. So, and then there's different visas, like if you're on a vessel versus on an airline or an aircraft, whether you're on a private yacht or different modes of transportation require different types of visas. So yeah, be careful. You got to look out and see what you need. But yeah, really interesting stuff, visas and dealing with all that. And, with the airlines, I'm a narrow body pilot, though I am internationally qualified, and I do fly internationally to South America and beyond. Most of the destinations I go to with my company, I don't really require a visa. But if I was a wide body pilot traveling internationally to Europe and Asia and some areas of South America, then yeah, I would be applying for a visa. And then what they do is they put it in your passport. And like you said, it's usually good for a pretty long period of time. But your stay is limited to however many days you're there to work the trip. So yeah, things that you don't really think about when you're a CFI and, teaching students how to fly a 172 around, and you're like, I just want to be an airline pilot. And then you get there and, usually
this is kind of another one of those things that there's a lot of variability in the kind of operation that you're doing. But Tony's doing it in an airline, they will walk you through everything. You don't really need to worry about it. They're going to tell you what you need to do. Working now where I am, again, there's a lot of support that we have. They've been going to these places for a while. They know exactly what to do, versus my previous position where it was kind of everything was on us. That was, on the places that we went at my previous job, that was all on me. I was like, I had to do all the research and figure out exactly what those things were. But depending on which route you take and how much support you have behind you will also dictate. I mean, you could have to do very little work other than just follow their instructions, or you could have to do all the work and then sweat bullets to make, sweat bullets by the time you get there, hoping that you checked all the boxes.
Yeah.
Because I've been that guy too.
Yeah. And sometimes you forget to check one box on a form, and man, does it ruin your day. So yeah,
depending on where you're going, that could be very bad.
Don't have any shells or ammunition in your bag, at the bottom of your bag. You might end up, you will follow in the news at all. You know that.
Don't take your ammunition into the Caribbean anywhere.
Ever.
The Turks and Caicos has been big for that for 6 months now, 12 months, whatever.
Yeah, they just released another I don't know what you call them, but tourist prisoner / whatever. Yeah, because they had a couple shells in the bottom of their bag because they used the same bag to go to the range, and you can't do that. So yeah, and you think it's limited to just passengers that don't fly very often. No, there's crew members that do some stupid shit and end up in jail. Directly to jail. Go to jail.
This kind of behavior is never tolerated in Boracua. You shout like that, they put you in jail right away. No trial, no nothing. Journalists, we have a special jail for journalists. You're stealing, right to jail. You're playing music too loud, right to jail, right away. You're driving too fast, jail. Slow, jail. You're charging too high prices for sweaters, glasses, you right to jail. You undercook fish, believe it or not, jail. You overcook chicken, also jail. Undercook, overcook. You make an appointment with the dentist and you don't show up, believe it or not, jail, right away. We have the best patients in the world. because of jail.
So yeah, be careful out there. Know where you're going. Know what's in your bag before you set foot on airport property. Speaking of, I just came back from a little vacation. That's another reason why it's been a while since the last podcast. Is I actually had 7 days off at work. I bid these days off and got them. Golden days, 7 days in a row. Amazing. Golden days. What are golden days? My company will give you so many golden days a month. That means crew scheduling can't call you and say, hey, we need you to work. You're being junior man. You know, they're untouchable. So I was able to acquire some golden days in June, and I flew to Italy and met up with my family, my mom, my sister, my uncles, my cousins. We all got together and had just a wonderful time. It had been decades since the last time I was able to do that and be all together with my family. Stayed with my uncle. He has a beautiful place out in the countryside, just outside of Rome, and spent one evening. We had a little party, a family gathering, and his neighbor, who happened to be an Italian restaurant owner and pizza chef, came out and shared his pizza recipe with everyone, which in Italy I found out is kind of rare. Pizza chefs in Italy protect their family secret recipes, under lock and key. And this neighbor that he had has been a good friend, and he came out and he showed us Americans how to make pizza. So there I was working my uncle's wood-burning pizza oven and learning how to make the dough and how to actually get the oven set up correctly. There's a whole science to it, and it's an art form. It was beautiful, and oh my God, some of the best pizza that you can imagine. All fresh ingredients, everything came straight from the garden, and just amazing. So thank you to my family and to everyone that made this trip happen. It was a wonderful experience. Coming back, though, was a bit tricky. I think I read this morning that today was going to be the busiest travel day in aviation history, more so than Thanksgiving holidays and Christmas. And go figure, the weekend after the 4th of July was going to be the busiest travel day by TSA numbers. That's they keep track of how many people go through TSA at all the airports in the United States, and the projections were today was going to be the busiest on record. And I got to experience some of the effects of that. So I went to Italy, not a problem. I used my flight benefits. Now, for those of you that may not understand what flight benefits are, as part of your agreement with employment, they say, okay, you get so many free travel tickets for you and your immediate family as an airline pilot or a flight attendant. And I'm not sure what the gate agents and all the other departments get, maintenance mechanics, but we can travel what's called non-revenue travel, meaning we don't pay for travel. Now, domestically at our company, we don't pay, not even for first class or business class, but internationally we would pay fees, taxes, those kind of things. So for, I don't know what it was, I think it all came out to about $60, I got to fly to Italy. So did a quick hop from Ontario, California to Dallas-Fort Worth, changed aircraft. The Dallas-Fort Worth to Rome Fiumicino airport was a little bit delayed, so I got to spend 5 very comfortable hours at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, and then got a nice seat on the back of a 787 and flew to Rome, where I hopped on a train and for like $11 or 11 euros and hopped on a train, and 45 minutes later my uncle was at the station picking me up, and it was just a wonderful experience. On the way back, I was going to come back 2 days ahead of schedule from when I needed to be on call at work, and the flights were just overbooked, oversold, like minus 10 seats on every flight. I thought, oh, this is not looking good. So I elected to go the next day, which is the day before I had to be on call on reserve. Now, you gain a day when you come back, so everything should have worked out. I I think it was 7 flights that were leaving Rome on that day that got me back to the United States. I didn't care where. I didn't care if it was going to be Dallas or Philadelphia, JFK. It didn't matter as long as I got to the States, because once I was in the States, then I could, shuffle the cards around and figure out how to get home. But everything again was overbooked, oversold. So I figured if I'm going to have to sit in the jump seat for this leg, I'm going to pick the shortest flight possible. So it was either going to be JFK or Philadelphia. Well, I chose Philadelphia, and sure enough, the gate agent there said, "I'm sorry, but the only way you're getting on this flight is cockpit jump seat. Are you okay with that?" "Well, how long's the flight?" "Well, it's scheduled at 9.5 hours. Well, gotta do what you gotta do. So I was very grateful to the captain and crew that they allowed me to ride in their cockpit jump seat. And you know that on these long flights, there are 3 crew members, 2 FOs, an FOA and an FOB, and the captain. And what they do is they take turns. So the FO, I got to meet him, a really nice guy. He was showing me the app on his phone, and they calculate the rest, like who goes first, who goes second is up to the captain, but they each get equal amounts of rest throughout the flight. And in this particular case, they each got a 2-hour block. So about 30 minutes after departure, the FO goes, "Well, I'm going to go back. I'm the first one," FOB, the one that was sitting in the jump seat next to me, because "I'm going to go back first. Captain said you can join me in the bunk if you want. You want to sit back there, or do you want to stay in here?" And I'm like, "No, I'll go sit back there. That way I can get up and stretch my legs, use the restroom if I have to." So sure enough, there's another jump seat style seat in the bunk area. And so I hung out there, took a little nap, and then they had the captain's turn was in the middle. And so he said, "Well, you can stay in the bunk if you want another couple hours. I'm going to just come, rest." And so he did. And there's like 2 little beds up there, like little bunk beds and curtains and plenty of blankets and pillows and stuff. And an area reading lights. They can read a book or, do whatever they do to rest. And then I was in a little seat in there. And then after the captain was done, I was like, "No, I'll go back." And they offered me a crew meal. And so I was sat in the flight deck for the rest of the flight, the last 2.5 hours. And I got to eat a crew meal and enjoyed that pasta. They said, "So what do you want? Do you want the crew pasta or do you want, we have gnocchi?" I went, "I'll try the gnocchi, please." And so I had some pretty good crew meals. Italy knows how to cater meals, man. So it was an interesting experience for me. I never sat international jump seat before. Been on the 787 plenty of times on the flight deck jump seat, and it was just a really nice experience. I had some really good conversations with the captain and the FOs, and landed in Philadelphia, and then hopped another flight to Dallas, and then literally ran through the airport because we were delayed to catch the last flight to Ontario, and got home. I was exhausted. I was up more than 24 hours trying to get back. And first thing I did when I got home is I crashed hard and slept for what felt like 12 hours straight. And I thought, well, okay, they didn't call me, thankfully. But then they gave me a phone call for the next day. And I was so jet lagged that I was like, "I'm sorry, I'm too fatigued. I wouldn't be safe for me to come in and fly." It was basically a deadhead out and one flight back. I was going to be responsible for one leg. Could I have done it? Probably, but I just felt like I was not recovered yet. And so the jet lag, for the first time in probably 30 years, I felt really strong jet lag, where I was slept until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then when it was time to go to bed, I was sitting in bed wide awake until 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So it took about 3 days for me to recover. And I just thought, wow, how do these pilots do this on a regular basis? This is crazy. I mean, I fly red eyes. I'm no stranger to the disruptions to the circadian rhythm, but my God, this is crazy. Jet lag. Roger's just cracking up laughing because he's like, "This is me on every single week." But man, it took me 3 days to finally pull my head out of my ass. I mean, My God, man. How do you do it, Roger? How do you
Description, that's pretty funny. It took me 3 days to pull my head out. I was so fatigued.
I was.
So there is, I do have to give you, there is one aspect that does work in your favor, I guess, in a way, is that you were there for a little bit. You were there for what, 7 days? How many days were you?
Yeah. Well, I was there for 5 nights, 4 days, really.
So you had a little bit more time to acclimate to the time, and you weren't actually there totally too long, but that kind of actually worked against you in terms of the jet lag, because you were a little bit more acclimated and then you flew all the way back.
It's funny you say that, because my uncle was giving me a ride back to the train station to go to the airport, and I told him that morning, I was like, you know what? This morning I finally woke up and I feel normal again.
You were right about
5
there.
days.
I remember when we did it, and I was there for longer periods of time, and it was right around day 4 usually that it was, I could go to bed at local bedtime and wake up at local morning time. Because they whoever they is says, a day per hour. Well, I think that's not quite right, and thank goodness, because otherwise when you're traversing 12 time zones, that would not be so good. But so you kind of got a little bit more acclimated, I think, than the air crews that do it, bang bang bang.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. Which would you rather prefer? You got acclimated, so maybe it took you a little bit more time to acclimate when you got back, versus the shorter trips. You don't know what time, like, who knows? You're like in the middle. You're in this quasi, who knows what time it is. I'm exhausted, but I have no idea what time it is. You kind of sleep when you do. But I think that it doesn't take, like, I think that it's usually only maybe 2 days, 1 or 2 days to get back to where if you haven't totally acclimated, if any of that makes sense.
Right.
Just your description was pretty funny. Like, what is it? This whole jet lag thing, it kicked my ass.
I thought I was immune.
Yeah, no kidding. There is no getting used to it. There's kind of the aspect that you just get used to being fatigued and exhausted.
Right.
More than anything else.
Right.
But it doesn't, it affects us just the same as everybody else, because it's a biological thing.
Yeah. Oh, the actions I took after I got back, the first night I got back, and you kind of get settled, you get washed up, you go right to bed, and because I think we landed around midnight maybe, and by the time I got home it was like 1 a.m, and then of course you're exhausted, but it's early morning in Italy, so I was like, well, okay, I'm exhausted, so I'm going to bed, and then you wake up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You're like, oh my God, I haven't slept in past 8 a.m. in a couple decades. This is crazy. And so you're like, okay, well, I'm up. So you're up, but you're groggy, and you're like, okay, no power tools today. That's fine. And you do like 5 loads of laundry. You're cleaning up the house. You're like, oh, I need to go get groceries. And so you go run errands, and then you come home and you're like doing stuff. And then it's summertime, so the sun goes down a little bit later. And then next thing you know, I look at the clock and I'm like, oh my God, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. What? I need to go to bed. So you go lay in bed and you're wide awake because, it's like a couple nights before you're having vino and pizza. And so you're like, what? And so that was tough. And then, of course, you finally fall asleep and you're in your own bed, and that's great. But then you wake up and you're like, oh my God, it's noon. Where'd the whole day go?
You have to put some effort into sometimes just being tired to try and reset yourself, and not just allow yourself to necessarily just sleep, because otherwise you can do it. It'll just take longer to get back.
I should have set some alarms, gone to the gym, done something to like get the blood flowing, and then taken a nap maybe in the middle of the day. And we all know that 45-minute to an hour nap, so that you don't get into REM sleep, so you can keep that sleep cycle back on track. I could have done these things, but when you're tired, you're not thinking straight. That was weird.
So actually, it's just this last trip. I got back on whenever in the evening. It was around 6 o'clock, and we landed. We did all the international customs. We got everything put away, and I'm driving home. I called my wife, and I'm talking to my wife. And I'm exhausted, right? I'm talking to her, and I'm driving home, And I was like, shit, I missed the freeway exit that I wanted. I was on one freeway and I missed the exit because I'm talking and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Which I was like, okay, I'll just take the next one. It's not that much longer. And I got onto the next freeway. And of course, it's Friday. It's Friday. And for horrific reasons, I get onto the other freeway and all of a sudden the freeway comes to a complete dead stop.
Oh my
I
gosh.
went nowhere for an hour. And I was so tired. I literally wanted to I wanted to cry. I'm in my car and I'm so tired, and I missed the shortest route. I will go slightly longer, and just because of terrible luck of the draw, I eventually made almost a 90-degree turn to get off on an off ramp because I couldn't take it anymore. I'm on the verge of tears as a 40-year-old man who just because I was tired. I was that tired. I missed my exit. I wanted to go home. I wanted to go to bed. And I wanted to cry because there was some kind of accident that literally it took me an hour, and I went nowhere. And then I took side streets the rest of the way home.
Yeah.
But wanted to just break down and cry simply because I was that tired.
Yeah. No, and it's funny. We have an instructor, a ground school instructor over at Legacy Airlines, and he's in a wheelchair. He's been in a wheelchair for decades, and he teaches multiple courses of ground school. I'll never forget him. Everybody knows him. He's got the greatest personality, and he tells the story and about how he ended up in that wheelchair. He was a pilot flying a red eye. He was in his, I think, 66 Camaro or some awesome freaking car. It was back in the 70s, I guess, when this happened. And he fell asleep behind the wheel on the way home after a trip. Wrecked his car, and he ended up paralyzed. And so it's a very, very serious thing to recognize when you're fatigued, not just when you're flying an airplane, but also when you're afterwards, when you're on the way home. I mean, I don't know a single pilot that hasn't complained about falling asleep behind the wheel or close to falling asleep behind the wheel. It's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous proposition. You have to really know yourself. If that means you sleep in the crew room for a couple hours, or get a hotel room, or sleep in your car even after a shift, do it. Because who knows, you're not only potentially saving your life, you could save the lives of innocent people that you may get in an accident on the way home. And yeah, I laughed when you were telling that story, Roger, because I can't tell you how many times I've done that. And same thing, I'm on the phone with a friend or a loved one, and to try to stay awake, which is great. Or I listen to a podcast on the way home instead of music. That helps too for me personally. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've passed my exit and I'm like, what the why am I driving to Pasadena? Like, holy crap, I'm 20 miles in the wrong direction. Yeah, you're on autopilot, right? We don't all have self-driving Teslas, at least not yet, that you say, take me home, and it just takes you home. But yeah. Well, look, someone has decided. Speaking of time zones and international flying, someone has decided to join us. Also joining us today is superb aviator and Squawk Ident Podcast co-host. He's a retired U.S. Army colonel, a former Black Hawk Battalion commander. His journey has led him to operate Apaches, Black Hawk, C-12s, CU-C-35s, and he has a master's degree in management and strategic studies. He's a former Embraer 145 and Boeing 737 pilot, currently a 5756 pilot for TransGlobal. The name we use here on the show is an alias to his employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. Joining us from his mobile studio from high atop the 37th floor of the Marriott Hotel in Zurich, Switzerland. Help me in welcoming our very own Terry S. Terry, how you doing?
I'm all right. Hopefully the Wi-Fi will hold up for this. But yeah, things are good. Just got back from dinner. It is just after 8 p.m. here. So we landed... gosh, I don't even know what time we landed. I think it was around 10. Got to the hotel about 11. Took a nap. Woke up, went and had dinner, and now I'm back in the hotel.
Nice. So it was nice to get to hang out with your crew. And now, how many members of the crew are there on this flight?
So with the pilots, there's three of us. There's the captain, the flying first officer, and I am on this flight, I am the international relief officer, the IRO.
Okay. And then flight attendants, how many are on that aircraft?
We have 7, and that allows them to cycle through for rest breaks as well.
Okay. And it's 7-6?
7-6.
Yeah. Nice. And so the big thing that our discussion from earlier was, how do you deal with the jet lag? You're crossing, and Roger was saying, it's different when you're on vacation because you're spending 4, 5, 6, 7 days there. So you start to get acclimated, and then when you come back, you have to get acclimated again, and it takes longer. But for flight crews, you're only there for 24, 30 hours, whatever it is, and then you're coming back. So you never really acclimate, so it's not that bad. So really, this is something I'm discovering here and now. After 20 years of being on the flight line, I never really stopped to think about it because I don't really travel that much on these vacations and stuff. Last thing I want to do is get on an airplane. I just stay home, do things around the house. But it's different for passengers versus pilots and flight crew. That the acclimation period is much less, and therefore you kind of stay within your own time zone. Is that what you're experiencing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's so one of the hardest things to figure out is how to rest the right way for you, and everybody's different. Everybody does it just a little bit differently, but you try different things to see what works. For me, well, for all of us, really, we're not here long enough to, as you said, acclimate to the new time zone. So we leave the East Coast. This flight, we were supposed to leave at about 5:45. We took about a 3-hour delay for some maintenance, but so then we left, and we left at about 8:30, 8:45. And we landed here. We were supposed to land at 8 a.m. We landed at 10 a.m. Local time, which would have been 4 in the morning, East Coast time. So you get in, you take a nap. For me, that's usually anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, and then get up and get out, get moving, do something. Whether that's just walking into town for dinner or going out sightseeing or whatever. Just get out, stretch the legs, move, and then come back to the hotel. For me, I try to stay up as late as possible, notwithstanding my wake up time in the morning. But I'll probably, like tonight, stay up till 1, maybe 2 in the morning local time. And we have a van time of 10 a.m. So I'll probably get about 6 hours of sleep or so on the backside, if I can sleep straight through. And that's another thing. It's because, it'll be 2 in the morning here, but it's like, 8 p.m. on the East Coast. So you're like, you try to go to sleep. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it only happens for a few hours. Sometimes I can make it until morning. I don't know. I think it depends on how much I go out and exert myself. Like if I go out and hike the mountain out here, I might be a lot more tired and sleep better. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. I've been doing this now for about 10 months, and I'm still trying to figure out what works the best. And then, you throw in things like delays and things like that, and it just it all gets messed up. So,
right.
The short answer is it depends.
Yeah. Yeah. And it depends a lot on like how you're feeling, how much rest you've been getting the whole week before. There's so many different factors. And it's important to kind of know your own body and know how it affects you. Like we were talking about it a little bit earlier, how being this fatigued, this tired, being out of your circadian rhythm is a lot like being drunk. It's a lot like the same effects happen on the body. The slower response time, the lack of making sound choices, all this stuff happens the same, affects the body the same from when you're tired, from when you're intoxicated or under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Now we've been talking basically about how flying into your WOCL, or WOCL, window of a circadian low, affects the body. And this is something that they'll go over under human factors in a lot of the airline training schools. On airline training, you'll go through some fatigue lecture, and they'll talk about the WOCL. First time I heard about WOCL, I was in ground school. And what is it? Now, as defined under FAR 117, it means a period of maximum sleepiness that occurs in the body between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. during any physiological night. The WOCL is based off the flight crew member's last acclimated time. So if it's home-based time, if that's what you're acclimated to, that is what your WOCL is. Now, there are particular assumptions when we talk about WOCL. One is that the amount of pre-flight duty before the flight depends. The flight departs the gate typically ranges between 45 to an hour prior, right? So generally contained in within a CBA for purposes of the paper, you say about an hour prior. So you're on duty an hour prior to your flight normally. Then you also have minimum connect times. You have permissible extensions to flight duty periods. All these things affect your duty time, your time of useful when you're supposed to be completely alert and everything. So these rest requirements all kind of go together. FAR 117 is one of the most convoluted and difficult requirements, regulations to understand. There are multiple charts, multiple tables that you have to consult. And thankfully, most unions out there, and I believe ALPA has a good FAR 117 app that you can use. And so at Legacy Pilots Association, we have an app too. It's not as user friendly as the ALPA one I've seen. But there's apps out there that you can consult. Go, hey, am I legal for this? Because you have flight time, you have duty time, you have did my flight touch a WOCL? If it did, how much rest am I required to get? And that's all dependent on both FAR regulations and your company's contract. Whatever the pilot contract is for that company could differ. So United and Delta pilots might be different than, say, American or Southwest pilots. They all have different contracts. So you have to kind of know that as well. It's funny that as I'm talking here, I'm reminded a couple weeks ago, I was flying a 3-day, and I was good for 5 days of reserve. So I was on this 3-day, and normally what happens is you fly the trip, you get back from the trip, they don't have anything else for you, so you go home. And if you're done around 10 or 11 o'clock at night, your rest starts usually, I think, 30 minutes or 15 to 30 minutes after you block in, depending if you're domestic or international qual. And so for 12 hours, they can't really call you, assign you anything, because you're in rest. And then if you're on long call, once they assign something to you or notify you, you have 12 hours before you need to show up to work. So most of the time you have a day off in between trips, and maybe they'll call you on the 5th day for an out and back or something. Well, in this particular case, a couple weeks ago, they assigned me a trip that was going to be 12 hours and 15 minutes sign-in time after my sign-out time the night before, so that I was in the middle of a trip. They assigned me another trip for the next day off. And I started looking at it, and it was 12 hours and 15 minutes. And I went, well, it's 12 hours minimum rest. So technically it's legal, but I'm landing at LAX like at 10:30 at night. By the time I get home, it's going to be midnight. And then I'm expected to be at a satellite airport in Ontario the next day, like at 10:45 in the morning, which means I'm up at 8 a.m. I'm like, that's not enough rest. And I got to commute and do some laundry and get everything ready. So I started remembering, didn't we have 13 hours in Los Angeles because of the satellite bases? So before I landed, I called the union and I said, hey, can I talk to a contract compliance person? Like, sure. What's going on? And I told him, I said, yeah, I don't know if this is legal. And the first she looked at it, she goes, well, it's 12 hours and 15 minutes. It's legal by 15 minutes. And I went, yeah, but didn't I mean, I don't know what the old contract, I know what the old contract said. I don't know what the new contract said. Isn't it somewhere in there? It says that we need 13 hours in LA, not 12. And she goes, oh yeah, I do remember that. Hold on a second. So she puts me on hold. She comes back 10 minutes later and says, you know what? I found it. You're right. In section 2, subpart B, subpart 65 or something like that. She goes, if you take a look at it, it says, and she read it to me. And she goes, and there's charts in here depending on the airport you're based at and the satellite. So in short, what the contract stated was that if you were a Los Angeles-based crew member and crew scheduling during a reserve sequence, tacks on another additional sequence at the end of it. If you're at a satellite base an hour before and an hour after your sequence, you get that extra hour. So you have to add an hour to your minimum rest. So from 12 hours, it goes to 13 hours. I go, so then I'm not legal for this. She's like, no, you're not. Contractually. FAR 117 is a different story, but contractually, you're not legal. I said, so how should I proceed? And she said, well, when you land at LAX, call crew scheduling, ask to speak to a lead or a supervisor, and explain that you are looking at it and you see that it's 12 hours and 15 minutes, but because it's a satellite base, you're supposed to have an extra hour. And then you can quote, part 2, subpart A, subpart 65. And if they want to look at it, the contract. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I landed, and as I was on the employee bus out to the car, I call crew scheduling, and the guy answers, and I say, yeah, can I speak to a lead or a supervisor? And they're like, sure. So I'm on hold for another 5-10 minutes, and then the supervisor comes on and goes, what do you want? Hello, this is Captain Charvella. I need a call because I have a concern about the. He goes, you know what? I already see it. You're illegal. They made a mistake. You're supposed to have 13 hours, and they only gave you 12 hours, 15 minutes. I already pulled you off the sequence. Next time, just talk to the crew scheduler. They're more than capable of doing. I'm like, listen, sir. I said, I'm just following the direction I was received from my union contract compliance. I just wanted to inform you and make sure that it got taken care of the correct way. I appreciate your time. And he calmed down. He's like, oh, okay, man, I'm sorry, man. Okay, fine. And so I was removed from that sequence because contractually it was against. And once you do something against a contract, you set a precedence, and you don't want to do that. You want to just always know your contract. I could have done it. I would have been tired, and I would have been breaking the contract. So, these things are there to protect us, to keep us from being fatigued and make sure that we're fit to fly. And, they're there for a reason. Use them. Have you guys ever had a similar situation?
Yeah, a lot of the time, I know, at least in my company, we've got a lot of new schedulers. And they just don't know all the ins and outs of the contract, right? They're learning. They're new. They're learning. They'll get experience and they'll figure things out. But to start, they don't know everything that they probably need to know, and especially when these one-off cases, or I shouldn't say one-off, but unusual cases, not the norm. When these cases happen. And then there are the occasional schedulers who like to push it to see how far they can get with it. And maybe they can just push you into something that contractually may be legal, may not be legal. But maybe it's not, maybe it's legal and not in accordance with the contract. But they might push you just a little bit and see if, they know your contract better than you do. That's where having those union volunteers really helps. I know for us, like I've had issues with crew scheduling where I've sent we can go through the Alba app and send a message to our different committees, and if it's a contract issue, you can send it to the contract hotline, and they have somebody on it within minutes. And they'll get back to you pretty quick. And if it's an issue, they will actually go to the company and say, hey, this is an illegal assignment or uncontractual assignment, or or whatever, and they'll get it taken care of for you. So that's actually kind of nice. At that point, I don't have to call a crew scheduler and have them get angry with me or anything like that.
Right.
It's it pays to know your contract. It pays to know your FAR 117. We actually have a FAR 117 guide for pilots that was made by the union, by our company union, that kind of lays out what they can do, what they can't do. It's got the tables in there, so you can kind of go in and figure out what you're legal for and what you're not legal for. It's pretty helpful.
Yeah. Well, like you said, Terry, thank you for saying it. Know your contract. It's like one of the last things you want to do, especially after being a new hire at an airline. You've just gone through the systems and your check rides and your IOE, and you're just learning all the stuff from the manuals, your SOPs, and trying to get comfortable in your seat. First 300 hours, that's what you're doing in the airplane, is just trying to build your nest and get comfortable. So the last thing you want to do is pick up some legalese thick book of pilot contract and read through it, and some part of this part with this part and that part, it's like the last thing you want to do. But it's something that is important and that you should, in due time, when able, learn it. And then if you don't feel comfortable learning it, use the resources, call the hotline, call the contract compliance committee, reach out send a text message to a friend that is a union rep or something, or knows a union rep. Get that answer, because the minute you, like you said, sometimes there are those that with intent for malice, they push it because they're desperate. So they're going to see if maybe you're going to say, no, I'm not doing that, it's not legal. So they just tack it on to the next pilot that's maybe more junior to you. And then maybe they go, no, it's not legal, I'm not doing it. So then they tack it on to the next pilot because they're desperate. And that pilot's a new hire that hasn't read the contract. And they're like, this sucks. Okay, fine. And then they'll do it and they get pissed off because they're tired and they don't want to do it. And they use labels like, oh, Screw Scheduling called me and screwed me. And it's like, yeah, well, you did it. You shouldn't have done it. And when the union says, just do it and grieve it. Oh, man, that put the tickle in my side, man. Just fly it and grieve it. Then 6 months later, you forget about it. And you're like,
yeah, what do they say? Fly now, grieve later.
Right. Yeah, no thanks. Meanwhile, Roger's over there bored out of his mind going, yeah, we don't have any of that stuff. Doesn't apply to me.
Not nearly to the extent that you guys do. I mean,
yeah. But you have a little bit more control too.
Like I've made fun of, I don't know if I made fun of it, but the reality is that you guys are always at war with pilot group versus management, and those who fall under the pilot group, which is pretty much just the pilots, and then there's management, which is dispatch, scheduling, everyone else.
Right.
And you guys are just always duking it out because it's like you guys think it's a zero-sum game or something. We're much more goal-oriented, I guess.
Yeah.
How to get things done. We know what the trips are. We don't schedule airplanes back to back like you guys do either. And so we have much fewer maintenance delays. Like Terry was just delayed 3 hours, which would extend a duty day. We don't necessarily have that. I mean, I talked about my last trip. My last trip, again, example, we do have an 18-hour max duty day for a 3-crew operation. We were right up in that 17 and a half hours. And if we had had any delay, then that would have put a stop to the trip, I guess. But we don't have quite the same dispatch issues that you guys do, just because the airplanes don't work the same way.
Yeah. Very, very, very true. And like you said, it's all about getting the mission done, right? Getting to your layover, getting your customers to where they need to go for the very important multi-million-dollar deal.
The executives or the owners or whatever it is to where they need to go. Whereas you guys, I mean, it's a different mentality, to be honest with you.
Right.
Well, and that's one of the hardest things. Like for me, coming out of the military, where it's always about mission accomplishment, right? You always have a mission. You always want to get to that goal. So I spent a career trying to find ways to make things work, to maneuver this or that or whatever to try to ultimately get to the end goal. And at the airline, that's what management is paid for. That's not what I'm paid to do, right? I'm paid to, for lack of a better term, be a bus driver, right? They have people who are paid to manage things and to take into account all these things. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to do everything we can do to get our passengers to where they need to be.
Right.
But there's a limit to what we can do, right? And there's once you cross over that limit, you are now doing somebody else's job. And that's not what we're paid to do. So there's a very common saying at my airline. It's we fly, they manage. And, we'll do everything within the limits of our power to accomplish the mission. But our power ends at a certain point, and then it becomes somebody else's job. And if they're not willing to do their job, I'm not going to do it for them. Unlike in the military, where I'm going to go over, around, or through somebody to get the job done. I can't do that at the airline because, I might piss somebody off, and they might contact HR, and now I've got an HR case that I've got. It's not even worth it. They fly, or I fly, they manage.
Yeah, at our company, especially during contract negotiations, we had a saying and stickers, and I actually have a sticker in my kit bag over there. And it's one ping.
Re-verify our range to target. One ping only. Captain, I just... Give me a ping, Vasily. One ping only, please. Aye, Captain.
And what that means is, like you see something, you go, okay, we need catering. Catering didn't show up. Captain, can you call catering? Sure. So you call operations, you go, yeah, this is flight so-and-so. We're at gate this. And catering hasn't shown up. All right, thanks, Cap. I'll give him a call. And that's it. One ping only. And like you said, Terry, let management manage. If you're putting out all the fires for them, why do they need to do their job? So, yeah.
Exactly.
But anyway, so I hope you guys all enjoy this conversation about how we went from fatigue and international flying and flying out of theater and different time zones and jet lag to one ping and so we covered the gamut today, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it. But I also wanted to talk about some headlines that have been affecting the pilot career progression. We talked about this a couple of shows ago in the episode, I think it was titled When the Music Stops. I believe we had Max Friend on that one, and we were talking about quarterly earnings reports and how they affect the industry. And this was for fourth quarter United Airlines that we were talking about their earnings report. And we also mentioned how first quarter and second quarter reports for some of the airlines out there were abysmal. Yeah, is that the right word? Abysmal? At best? Yeah. And so they were abysmal at best, and how that would affect the pilot group, the career progression, the quality of life. Well, some other airlines out there are making headlines. Spirit is one in question. And I have an article here from AbWeb. Just briefly, I'll talk about what they said about it. Spirit Airlines issues furlough notices amid executive pay raises. Not good optics, if you ask me. Spirit airline pilots and their union have raised concerns over the airline's decision to issue furlough notices to pilots while simultaneously approving salary increases for several top executives. In a July 1st 8K filing, the carrier announced pay raises for 4 of its C-suite executives and its CEO. At the same time, 200 pilots received furlough notices, a plan the airline initially laid out in April due to aircraft engine issues and slower growth plans. According to the filing, Spirit announced that the appointment of Frederick Cromer as Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, replacing Scott Harrelson, who left last month. Spirit detailed salary increases and bonuses for other C-suite members who will receive base salaries to the tune of $950,000, $650,000, $525,000, and $500,000 beginning July 1st. Meanwhile, the low-cost carrier made a deal with Airbus to delay all deliveries until 2030 through 2031 in an effort to save money. Spirit says the move will improve its liquidity by $340 million over the next 2 years. Furlough notices and delaying aircraft deliveries. We know that this is a reaction to the fact that the merger with JetBlue didn't go through. The FCC said nope, not going to happen, and so they're now scrambling furlough notices. So what the future of Spirit Airlines will be, we have no idea. But in terms of the pilot group, whenever furlough notices go out, there are pilots that go, you know what, I'm out of here before they claim bankruptcy, and they'll start trying to go to any other carrier that will hire them. Unfortunately, a lot of carriers have stopped hiring, including American Airlines. In another article from 1 Mile at a Time, I'll put a link in the show notes to all of these, American stops pilot hiring, cancels training classes. Now, they were really holding off. American, for a long time, was one of the only airlines left in the U.S. that didn't slow down hiring practices. But they finally caved in. American Airlines expects it will need fewer pilots in the next year, which is pretty telling a development about the situation that the airline is in. American cancels new hire pilot training classes. When airlines hire new pilots, they first have to go through intensive training, including getting a type rating for the aircraft that they're going to fly, assuming they don't already have one. Pilot hiring is always a long-term planning process, as airlines can't just hire pilots today and have them flying tomorrow. At XJohnNYC shares an interesting update regarding American's pilot hiring. Not only has American paused new pilot hiring, but the airline has even informed pilots who have already been conditionally hired that the airline doesn't plan to have any new hire pilot classes for the remainder of 2024. The airline states that this is part of the company's ongoing evaluation of commercial and talent needs. The airline expects to make decisions about pilot class dates for the first quarter of 2025 later this year. In other words, it's not even a given that American will resume new pilot training classes then. This is, of course, a big bummer for those pilots who had already been conditionally hired, but hadn't yet started their training. Generally, the goal for airline pilots is to land a job at one of the major airlines, and then that's their forever home. So they want to start flying for those airlines and get on their seniority list as soon as possible. There's more, but you can read about it in the link there. So yeah, American has halted pilot hiring, which is not just a bad news day for the people that want to get hired at American, but also for the pilots that are at American. That's going to affect everything from upgrades to maybe holding a base that you want to hold more than where you're at. A lot of people get hired and they get whatever is available and they have to commute. And once their seniority is big enough or senior enough, then they'll put in a transfer to go to a base closer to home, maybe get rid of their commute altogether. So the fact that American has stopped pilot hiring puts a damper on not just new hires, but everybody at the company as well that's looking to increase their quality of life. Now, over at TransGlobal, they stopped hiring as well. Is that right, Terry?
I stopped classes for, I believe it was May and June, and classes are resuming in July. I think the guys starting class in July got their offers in like the January, February timeframe. So TransGlobal is still hiring and still conducting classes. Like I said, they'll start picking back up towards the end of this month. And then continue on for the foreseeable future. They haven't made any announcements that they're going to stop anytime soon. So
Yeah.
I think it's all part of the growth plan. And that's one of the things that caused the slowdown was the growth, the actual delivery of new airplanes, and I think that's kind of been one of the reasons across the industry. Um, this whole Boeing debacle um, is one of the primary drivers, at least at Transglobal. It's the primary driver because we're taking, I think, half, maybe less than half of the airplanes that we planned on having delivered this year. We're getting half of that, so that obviously impacts pilot hiring. If you're only getting half the airplanes, you only need half the pilots, right?
Right.
So the pilot class is a little bit smaller, but they will continue. And I think Airbus has had their own issues with with the Neo engines? Is it?
I think there's a engine issue with the Neos and their XLR certification type.
XLR.
Yeah, the XLR deliveries got delayed. I believe Legacy Airlines has 20 XLRs on order. However, we did get some information that they are back on the schedule for delivery soon. I believe it was first quarter 2025 for the first one. So, things are starting to ramp back up. But yeah, I believe the Boeing debacle is part of Americans' decision as well. So we're just going to have to wait and see. And considering the economy, our political future here in the United States, there's plenty of reasons why everything should kind of just slow down and wait. Unfortunately, the airline industry, as an economist would tell you, is a contributing factor to the future of the economy of the country. Whether we're heading towards a recession, a depression, whatever you want to call it, usually the airline industry is the first indicator. The confusing part of what's happening right now is, I just saw this, I think we mentioned it earlier, is that today, July 7th, is going to be 2024, is going to be the TSA's numbers are going to reveal that it's going to be the busiest travel day in history for America. Meaning more people are flying, passing through airports than ever before.
Travel hasn't slowed down.
So what's the deal here? All the flights are full, overbooked, oversold. There's not a seat. Like if you're a non-rev, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, trying to go on vacation with your family, forget it. Buy a ticket. You have to buy a ticket because those available open seats that non-revenue employees get to use as part of their flight benefits, they're non-existent. I mean, maybe you can I had to sit in the jump seat coming back from Italy on a 9.5-hour flight. I mean, normally you would expect at least get a coach seat, something's open. No, everything's overbooked, oversold because they overbook the flights by a certain percentage because they're depending on people missing their connections. They're depending on weather delays. So what they're doing is they want every flight to go out full every single day with no open seats because that's how they make their money. And sometimes that's what it comes down to, especially with fuel costs and everything else. Sometimes it comes down to 1 or 2 tickets to see if your flight is in the red, the operation is in the red or in the black. So, it's a very difficult time to fly. And with some of these companies getting rid of their call centers, like Frontier, they got rid of their call center. So if your flight cancels on Frontier, now what are you going to do? Who are you going to call? No one. There's an AI bot on an app that will reschedule you, and good luck. We're all counting on you. So I think customer service in the airline industry is going to make or break
travel
airlines.
Travel has not slowed down at all.
No. So, to cancel.
Travel has not slowed down at all. I walked through the airport last night and there was, it was packed. I mean, walking to the jet last night, the terminal was just absolutely packed. Your point about non-revving, I tried to non-rev last month. I did. I went down to Atlanta from DC to pick up my mother-in-law. She's on my benefits. She's never flown before, so I wanted to kind of walk her through the process, get her back up so she could see the grandkids and, hang out with us for a while. So non-rev down there. The night before I left, for the flight back from Atlanta to DC, there were like 45 open seats. When I landed in Atlanta at 10 that morning, there were 35 open seats.
Yeah.
We were the last two on the airplane. And only because I was I think we were numbers 3 and 4.
Yeah.
On the standby list.
Yeah.
It had gone from 45 open seats to oversold and weight restricted. Somehow we managed to get on, but it's crazy. So yeah, non-revving is, if you need to go somewhere, buy a ticket, like you said.
Yeah.
It's just not a good time to try to non-rev, given it's summer. That's kind of expected, but yeah, I mean, like, I think Transglobal last week announced that I think it was leading into the 4th of July had in the history of the airline. So it's people are traveling, and that's what, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the economy's doing better than people are letting on, or I don't know. It's hard to say.
Roger, did you have a comment?
Particularly. I mean, I think it's hard to make too many leap conclusions from how busy it is this summer, because a lot of summer travel is booked, especially international travel. I know that Europe is huge right now this summer, but those trips are booked pretty well in advance. And then, kind of coming back to your point, who knows what the future is going to hold in terms of politically and economically. I think that things probably are slowing down. People's excess cash that's lying around, I think, is kind of being depleted, and so we'll see what it holds over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, because a lot of this stuff, I think, has been booked a little bit more in advance, and summer's just always a busier travel season, but who really knows? I mean, people have been predicting some kind of economic slowdown for a long time now, and I don't think that we've really actually seen a real one materialize. You're always wondering, well, is it right around the next bend? Who knows?
Right.
I live in a different world than you guys, especially, for lack of better terms, at the echelons that I fly at. We still have a shortage of pilots.
Yeah.
On the business level, and a lot of it's because the major airlines, for a long time, for those couple of years, I guess not a long time, but for a couple of years, they're sucking everybody up and throwing money at them.
Yeah. Well, now that's starting to slow down. So
it definitely has slowed down, but at the same time, when a lot of those, even in the corporate world, it's a progression. You don't just jump right into a Global 7500 and fly the world. And so when a lot of the lower tiers, there hasn't been a lot of development. And so at the upper echelons, where we have not the seniority thing, like, we can move laterally. I'm a captain at one corporation. I would not go back to an FO at another corporation. I go in again as a captain. But there is still a lot of hiring going on from the corporate standpoint, and I don't necessarily foresee that stopping, just because we're a little bit shorter, I think, than the airlines, because the airlines were offering such great perks there for those couple of years, and hiring the sheer amount of people. What, 1,000 people per month?
Yeah. Yeah, it's staggering, like, how good it was for so long. And I don't think it's gonna, they say this industry is very cyclical in nature, and it's only a matter of time, if you are around long enough, that you're gonna get furloughed, and you're gonna go through a medical leave for a while, and all the things that they tell you. You can expect these things. So be ready, financially plan for this. Don't live paycheck to paycheck. Don't buy a house that you can maybe afford in a few years when you upgrade. Live within your means, because this industry is very cyclical. And I believe that we are on a downward trend right now, but I don't think it's going to rebound in a downward trend the way it has increase so dramatically. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars in bonuses.
Can't do that.
No.
I mean, COVID the amount of people that they let go, and then all of a sudden the snapback reaction. So then now they have to bring all the pilots back. Plus, for the little bit of growth, I mean, I don't think you're going to see that again in our lifetimes. Just because COVID, I hope we don't, because COVID was such a.
Well, remember that was not an airline choice.
It was like it's like a dream or something, but it changed so much, and travel being kind of at the forefront of it.
Right. Well, you have to remember that. So all these airlines were furloughing because they thought it was another 9/11. These were the terms that they were throwing out there at the time, at the beginning of COVID, at the beginning of 2020. So they furloughed a bunch of people and they downsized, and all the restaurants and businesses and the airports were all closed, and everyone was staying home, and vaccines. And let us not forget that the whole world, let alone the country, kind of shut down for a period of time. And the only reason that the airlines hired everyone back in that rubber band effect, or that snapback to hire everyone back, is because in order to get the government bailout, the government loans, the government subsidies to continue operating as an essential air provider, the condition was you had to hire back every employee that you furloughed. And so the companies, I believe that they wouldn't have hired everyone back the way they did. They would have trickled them back slowly to try to recuperate the loss financially. But because as a condition to get the government millions of dollars in government bailout, they had to hire everyone back immediately. I remember got my furlough notice. I was on a zero timeline, and next thing you know, they're like, all right, you're back. 2 months later, you're back. All right, bid accordingly. And it wasn't because they needed me. It was because they had to do it. And so I think, like you said, Roger, we're never going to see this again, where the industry bounced back career progression wise, not economically, but career progression wise. It bounced back. And then there were people that weren't coming back. They're like, you know what? F this career field is too unstable. And they weren't coming back. And then they're like, well, we need you guys back. Here, have a bonus to come back, or have a bonus to get hired, or come from another airline and we'll give you a $100,000 bonus. So even at the regional scale, like right now, we're seeing kind of a downturn. And it's not just at the mainline carriers that they're not hiring. I was hoping to have Alex on the show. Alex is actually doing some recurrent training today. Good luck on your LOE, Alex. But I was going to have him talk about the fact that some of the regional airlines out there are no longer paying for the ATP CTP program. So you get hired, and now you're responsible for that, whatever it is, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 program to get your ATP CTP. It used to be that they paid for it. You got a CJO, conditional job offer, and then they'd send you, as soon as you had your 1,500 hours, they'd send you for a 5-day course or 4-day course to get your ATP CTP. And then once you passed your ATP written and you had that certificate in your hand, then they hired you. And then you got whatever hours you were short, you got it in the simulator during your long-term training as a new hire. They're no longer paying for that. Why? Well, because they need to recuperate some of the costs of giving people $100,000 bonuses. So in the end, it all kind of balances out. If you're one of the fortunate pilots that were able to take advantage of these bonuses and get hired at the right time, the right place, then great. But if you're now on the tail end of this, now you're having to shell out thousands of dollars just to get a job. Must mean that they don't need pilots that badly. So this is a downward trend in the career progression of an airline pilot, airline career. And I believe that it won't be a dramatic drop. I believe that it'll kind of stabilize here in the next probably 6 months. Once the election's over in the United States, the whole world is watching to see what happens. And I think we'll start to see a growth back again with the demand of pilots, because people are not slowing down. They're flying. I don't know where they're getting the money. Maybe we should raise ticket prices. Just an idea. Well, today on the show, I wanted to do something we haven't done in a really long time. I used to really enjoy doing these segments where we talked about the history of a particular airport or a particular flight or pilot. One of my favorites was we did the history of LAX. We talked about how it started, and it's always been pretty popular. We talked about JFK one time. I know we did history of some certain aviators. like Queen Bess and Chuck Yeager. And so those are all on YouTube channel. If you haven't checked out the YouTube channel, it's at Squawk Ident Podcast on YouTube. Plenty of videos. There's videos on there, clips from previous shows. All the shows are now uploaded on there audio-wise. But there are videos in there, and there's some documentaries in there as well. So I encourage you all to go visit Squawk Ident Podcast on YouTube and check it out. But today I wanted to talk about the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. For quite some time during COVID, as we were just discussing, Dallas-Fort Worth was the busiest airport in the world with the number of departures and arrivals of passenger service. So I wanted to give it its due credit and talk about the history of DFW. Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport has a ICAO of KDFW. It is a primary international airport serving the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and the North Texas region in the United States of Texas. I like how they said that, the United States of Texas. It is the largest hub for American Airlines, which is headquartered near the airport, and is the third busiest airport in the world by aircraft movement and the second busiest in the world by passenger traffic in 2022 and 2023, according to the Airport Council International. As of 2021, it is the sixth busiest international gateway in the United States and the second busiest international gateway in Texas, behind Houston IAH. The hub American Airlines operates at DFW is the second largest single airline hub in the world and in the United States, behind Delta Airlines hub in Atlanta. But DFW is located roughly halfway between the major cities of Dallas and Fort Worth. DFW spills across portions of Dallas and Tarrant counties and includes portions of the cities of Grapevine, Irvine, Euless, and Coppell. At 17,207 acres, approximately 26.89 square miles, DFW is the second largest airport by land area in the United States after Denver International Airport, covering an area larger than Manhattan in New York City. It has its own postal office zip code, 75261, and United States Postal Service city destination at DFW Airport, Texas, as well as its own police, fire protection, and emergency medical services. DFW Airport has service to 254 destinations, 191 domestic, and 63 international, from 28 passenger airlines as of April 2023. DFW Airport has service to more nonstop destinations than any other airport in North America. Every major city in the contiguous United States can be flown to in 4 hours or less. It is also the largest carbon-neutral airport in the world and the first in North America to achieve this status.
As early as 1927, before the area had an airport, Dallas proposed a joint airport with Fort Worth. Fort Worth declined the offer, and thus each city opened its own airport, Love Field in Dallas and Meacham Field in Fort Worth, each of which had scheduled airline service. In 1940, the Civil Aeronautics Administration earmarked $1.9 million, equivalent to $41.3 million in 2023, for the construction of the DFW, or Dallas-Fort Worth Regional Airport. American Airlines and Braniff Airlines struck a deal with the city of Arlington to build an airport there, but the governments of Dallas and Fort Worth disagreed over its construction, and the project was abandoned in 1942. After World War II, Fort Worth annexed the site and developed into Amon Field with the help of American Airlines. In 1953, Fort Worth transferred its commercial flights from Meacham to the new airport, which was 12 miles from Love Field. In 1960, Fort Worth purchased Amon Carter Field and renamed it Greater Southwest International Airport, GSW, in an attempt to compete with Dallas Airport, but GSW's traffic continued to decline relative to Love Field. By the mid-1960s, Fort Worth was getting 1% of Texas air traffic, while Dallas was getting 49%, which led to the virtual abandonment of GSW. The joint airport proposal was revisited in 1961 after the FAA refused to invest more money into separate Dallas and Fort Worth airports. While airline service had steeply declined at both GSW and Meacham, Love Field was congested and had no more room to expand. Following an order from the federal government in 1964 that it would unilaterally choose a site if the cities could not come to an agreement, Officials from the two cities finally agreed on a location for a new regional airport that was just north of the near abandoned GSW and almost equidistant from the two city centers. The land was purchased by the cities in 1966 and construction began in 1969. The cost of the first phase of FW Regional Airport was estimated at $700 million.
Voters went to the polls in cities throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex to approve the new North Texas Regional Airport, which was named after the North Texas Commission that was instrumental in the regional airport coming to fruition. The North Texas Commission formed the North Texas Airport Commission to oversee the planning and construction of the giant airport. Area voters approved the airport referendum, and the new North Texas Regional Airport would become a reality. However, many Dallas residents remain satisfied with Love Field, and the attempt to establish an independent Dallas-Fort Worth Regional Airport Authority, despite strong backing from the Dallas Chamber of Commerce and Dallas Mayor J. Eric Johnson, failed when Dallas voters rejected the proposal by a narrow margin. After further negotiation, the cities instead established an appointed airport board consisting of 7 members from Dallas and 4 from Fort Worth, and were able to persuade all existing air carriers at Love, GSW, and Meacham to move to the new regional airport. Under the original 1967 airport design, DFW was to have pier-shaped terminals perpendicular to a central highway. In 1968, the design was revised to provide for semicircular terminals, which served to isolate loading and unloading areas from the central highway, and to provide additional room for parking in the middle of each semicircle. The plan proposed 13 such terminals, but only 4 were built initially.
Wow. 13. That's that's a lot of terminals, considering how
Can you
big.
imagine 13 terminals at
Wow.
DFW?
Yeah, that's how long would it take you to get from Terminal A to Terminal Z? Oh my gosh. Well, DFW held an open house and dedication ceremony on September 20th through the 23rd of 1973, which included the first landing of a supersonic Concorde in the United States, an Air France aircraft en route from Caracas to Paris. The attendees at the airport's dedication included former Texas Governor John Connally, Transportation Secretary Claude Brinegar, U.S. Senator Lloyd Bentsen, and Texas Governor Dolph Briscoe. The airport opened for commercial service as Dallas-Fort Worth Regional Airport on January 13, 1974, at a cost of $875 million, equivalent to $5.5 billion in 2024, which includes $65 million for the land and $810 million in total construction costs. At the time of DFW's opening at 17,500 acres, it was the largest airport in the world ever constructed in terms of land area, surpassed in October of 1975 with the opening of Montreal Mirabel International Airport. The first flight to land was American Airlines Flight 341 from New York, which had stopped in Memphis and Little Rock. Surrounding cities began to annex the airport property into their city limits shortly after the airport was developed. The name change to Dallas-Fort Worth International did not occur until 1985. An innovative feature of the airport during its early history was the Vought AirTrans, the world's first operational fully automated people mover system, later rebranded as the Airport Train, and then the Terrain with 2 A's, signifying American Airlines. The system ultimately encompassed 13 miles of fixed guideways and transported as many as 23,000 persons per day at a maximum speed of 17 miles per hour. When it opened, DFW had 4 terminals numbered 2W, 2 Echo, 3 Echo, and 4 Echo. During its first year of operation, the airport was served by American Airlines, Braniff International Airways, Continental Airlines, Delta Airlines, Eastern Airlines, Frontier Airlines, Ozark Airlines, Rio Airways, and Texas International Airlines. Southwest Airlines had not begun flights when the other airlines agreed to move from Love Field to DFW, and it had only received approval to fly within the state of Texas. It refused to move to DFW because it felt that convenience for Dallas residents was central to its business. After the Airline Deregulated Act was enacted in 1978, Southwest announced flights to other states. Local officials feared that the resumption of the long-distance flights at Love would threaten DFW's financial stability, prompting the enactment of the Wright Amendment in 1979, which banned airliners with more than 56 seats from operating between Love Field and airports beyond Texas and its 4 neighboring states, Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Oklahoma.
In the late 20th century, the Wright Amendment had become unpopular with travelers and business groups because it suppressed local airline competition, but it was backed by powerful political interests, including American Airlines, which did not want direct, low-fare competition from Southwest Airlines at its DFW Fortress hub. Efforts to revise the amendment in the 1980s and early 1990s became mired in lawsuits and political wrangling. In a 2023 statement to the Dallas Morning News, former American Airlines Chief Executive Officer Robert Crandall said that at the time, the Wright repeal was a greater threat to American Airlines than to DFW Airport. The Wright Amendment status quo was upset between 1996 and 2000 when laws were passed adding new states to the Wright service area, and several airlines began long-distance service from Love Field under the previously unexploited 56-seat exemption. This broke Southwest's monopoly at Love Field, threatened highly profitable American Airlines routes at DFW, and proved that changes to the amendment were now politically viable. Southwest soon began campaigning to repeal the Wright Amendment, but was staunchly opposed by American Airlines, which feared that Southwest would maintain its near monopoly at Love Field while simultaneously expanding DFW Airport and possibly Fort Worth Alliance Airport or Meacham Airport.
In a 2006 agreement brokered by Kay Bailey Hutchison, U.S. Senator from Texas, DFW Airport, Dallas, Fort Worth, Southwest, and American agreed to mutually support the repeal, but with a number of conditions. The agreement permanently capped the number of gates at Love Field and Southwest preferential leases to the remaining gates. Until 2025, National Passenger Flights must surrender Love Field gates if it or any codeshare agreement partners offer flights from DFW or another airport in the Metroplex, and the parties agreed to cooperatively oppose passenger service from other airports in the area. On October 13, 2014, the Wright Amendment domestic flight restrictions ended, allowing airlines to fly from Love Field to anywhere in the U.S. Despite the increased local competition, the number of annual enplanements at DFW grew by 5 million from 2013 to 2015, only slightly less than an approximately 6 million passenger increase at Love Field during the same period. Airports Council International named DFW Airport the best large airport with more than 40 million passengers in North America for passenger satisfaction in 2016. In June 2018, DFW Airport opened a fully functioning freestanding emergency room on airport grounds, located in Southgate Plaza near the airport headquarters and rental car center. With this opening, the facility became the first actual ER on an airport's property anywhere around the globe. DFW Airport tentatively completed a $2.7 billion Terminal Renewal and Improvement Program, TRIP, which encompassed renovations of 3 of the original 4 terminals, A, B, and E. Work on the project began following the conclusion of Super Bowl 45 in February 2011. Terminal A was the first terminal to undergo these renovations, which were completed in January 2017 at a cost of about $1 billion. This was followed by the completion of Terminal E in August 2017 and Terminal B in December 2017. While Terminal C was originally part of the multi-billion-dollar renovations, American Airlines in 2014 asked to delay renovations of the terminal. In early 2023, Frontier Airlines established a crew operating base at DFW and added a gate to accommodate additional flights. In 2023, DFW served 81,764,044 passengers, a record for the facility, exceeding 80 million passengers for the first time in the airport's 50-year history.
DFW Airport has embarked on a series of expansion projects expected to last until the year 2028. The first phase will construct the long-discussed Terminal F. Albeit significantly downsized from its earlier plans, the 15-gate concourse will cost $1.63 billion and will be built between the years 2024 and 2026. Previous plans for Terminal F called for 24 gates at a cost of $3.5 billion. Terminal F will have no landside facilities. Passenger and baggage screening and services will be handled in a new expansion of Terminal E, with passengers boarding Skylink to reach Terminal F, the baggage traveling in a tunnel under the International Parkway. Terminal F will be built in a way that could be expanded to 22 gates in the future. The second phase of the project will include the delayed renovations of Terminal C, adding piers with additional gates to Terminal A and C, and upgrading roadways. The $2.72 billion project will add 9 additional gates and will be completed in phases by the year 2028. Well, I mean, I hope you guys enjoyed this brief history of the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. There was actually much more data that we had on the airport, but for time, we decided to kind of shorten things out a little bit and just give you the overall idea. I had no idea that these restrictions applied to Dallas Love. I didn't know that Dallas-Fort Worth had an actual ER associated with the airport. That's amazing. It's like a hospital emergency room. If there's ever an emergency, Dallas would be a great place to divert to. They got their own emergency room.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this brief history of DFW. I would like to do even more airports here in the future. If there's a particular airport that you think you would like to hear a brief history on, send me an email and we can put it in one of the future shows here. It just takes time to produce and edit and try to get a YouTube video out for this. So be patient with us, but we'll get it all out there on the interwebs. Anything you want to talk about, Terry, before we wrap it up?
It's kind of funny. So Taylor Swift is doing a concert here in Zurich tomorrow night and the next night.
Oh boy, Tay-Tay.
Yeah, and so the flight was full of Swifties coming over, and I guess the funny thing is, or maybe it's not funny, maybe it's just sad, is that a lot of the folks have said it's cheaper for them to buy a ticket over here, buy plane tickets to fly over here, pay for the hotel, bring the whole family, than it is to find Taylor Swift tickets in the U.S.
Yeah. Thank you, Ticketmaster.
It's insane.
You ruined everything.
That's absolutely insane. But apparently, one of the reasons for that is there's no scalping over here, and so you can get tickets at face. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I have to remember that for when my girls start demanding to go to Tay-Tay concerts.
Yeah, that must have been a lot of sequence on that airplane because I was in Atlanta last year when Taylor Swift was there doing 3 nights. And the hotel that I happened to stay at for the layover happened to be the same hotel that was across from this convention center, concert venue, whatever it was. And yeah, it's a very interesting crowd. Taylor Swift, call it what you want, but in terms of business, she's killing it. She's killing it. Has been since she was 14, killing it. It is a brand. It is a lifestyle, and it's the mothers and fathers of the kids that accompany their kids, and then they don't go to the concert because it's so damn expensive. So they drive them out. They stay at the hotel. They send the kids off to the concert, and they sit at the hotel and drink at the bar. That, my friend, is a show in itself. And I've witnessed a few shenanigans. But good luck to all the Swifties out there that are in Switzerland. I mean, that's wild. It's cheaper to fly to Switzerland to go to a concert than it is to. Oh my god. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, and I will say, credit to the Swifties. They were all on their best behavior. We had a 3-hour delay getting out of there last night, and they were great. They made a bracelet for the captain.
Nice.
Gave him a little friendship bracelet.
Nice.
Yeah. So it was cool. They were all good. They're teenage girls, like maybe 13 to 16, that age range. There was a whole group of them, and they were super super nice.
Yeah,
so.
I noticed that too in Atlanta when I was there. A lot of tweens and teens, but also a lot of young men and women in their 20s. The ones that freaked me out were the ones that were in their 40s and dressed up, and especially the men that were in their 40s dressed up, and that was a bit weird. I don't want to say anything negative, but yeah, no, homie, don't play that. So I better not see you wearing pink wigs and shit, Terry, when you're on your layovers. That just came from a Taylor Swift concert.
No.
glitter eyelashes.
No, thankfully, we leave before that party starts. So.
Well, fantastic. Well, sir, thank you so much for joining me. Roger, thank you as well.
Thank you for having me back. It's been a while, and it's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll see you on possibly the next show, yes?
Yes, after my next trip, the next show.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing about the Korea and China and all those travels, and maybe the next show we'll talk about how to open the baggage compartment door.
Yeah. Yes, we can.
And as we wrap up episode 146, I just want to, again, say thank you so much to all the listeners out there. All 7 of you have been fantastic, and I really appreciate all the words of encouragement and all the emails that have been pouring in. And I keep doing this, and I do this for you guys, for all of you listeners out there. Please help us out by sharing this podcast online with your friends, with your family, with anyone who you might think is interested in aviation and what we do here. It really does make a big difference. Help us get our numbers up, become more popular, and we can reach just a much larger audience to get out there and explain what we do. One final thank you also to Roger and to Terry for joining me today. We really enjoyed the discussion. We hope that you did as well. Make sure you subscribe or follow to the Squawk Ident Podcast on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. We also love receiving listener feedback, as we mentioned. You can send us an email or even audio feedback via our website at aviatortony.com. That's spelled AV8, the number 8, RTONY, or Alpha Victor 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. And you'll also find audio archives, photos from the Flightline guest book photo tab, where you can see some of the photos from our past guests. There's even a pilot shop. I'm not really quite sure on how that's doing because I get absolutely zero metrics on that. But if you're interested in a t-shirt or a hat or a mug, you can go there. We also appreciate any financial contribution that you can muster. It helps us keep the value for value on our show going. So right there on the homepage from our website, you can do a one-time donation or recurring donation, and that goes towards getting this podcast produced. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can also find us under the Squawk Ident Podcast. I also want to thank you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and most importantly, take care of each other. All right, Roger, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Great to see you again.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.
Meow.
West vector, over. What?
Do you know anything about planes?
Clearance, Clarence.
Roger, roger. What's our vector, Victor?
The elite. Best of the best. We'll make you better. We'll make you better.
Do you know anything about planes?
Oh, jeez. Oh, you kill me. You really do.
Do you know anything about planes?
Captain, how soon can you land? I can't tell. You can tell me, I'm a doctor. No, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Do you know anything about planes?
Can you fly this plane and land it?
It's an entirely different kind of flying.